I want to introduce our next rapid-fire keynote. He is Rob Cameron, who's the Chief Product Officer at Moneris. And as such, I'm supposed to say he has 16 years experience, but then he's going to come up here and you're going to think I lied because he looks 16. But sorry, it's true. But he's Chief Product and Marketing Officer, which means he's responsible for taking Moneris' products, their point-of-sale offerings, creating a unified platform, solutions for e-commerce, in-store, and mobile, and he has responsibility for both Canada and the US, which means that in the last 3 days he's been in 3 different cities and 4 different time zones or something. Please join me in welcoming Rob to the stage.
Good morning, everyone. And I really enjoyed that last talk, and hopefully many of you will join me in trying to find a way, either personally or professionally, to try and help out Mayor. But very well done, and thank you. So it's great to see so many of you out here early on a Friday morning after a great rodeo last night and on the last day of Payments Panorama. And I did get a lot of texts this morning saying, sorry, I'll miss it, but clearly it wasn't from any of you. And I think one of the reasons there's so much engagement right now around payments is the amount of change that's going on in both consumer and business-to-business payments. And I had the chance on Monday, I attended Apple's Worldwide Developer Conference, and I was really encouraged to see how much profile they gave Apple Pay in their keynote address. And it's not just about Apple, but what's happened since Apple really entered the fray is a regeneration of investment and interest in apps and in solutions that improve the proposition for both consumers, but also are improving the proposition for merchants. And they're doing that in a number of ways. And in doing so, they're really changing the checkout in the consumer to business scenario. But that's not really about what my talk's about. Oh, I better get the remote. About today, because I really want to take some of the success. And if we look at success as a measure in consumer to business payments is taking cash out of the system, then I'd say that we're succeeding. And I can see a world by 2030, I wish it was sooner, but we ran all the numbers, in 2030, when cash really looks like it'll become the exception of payment in the consumer to merchant scenario, 2030. Now, if we look at business-to-business payments, it's quite a different situation, isn't it? Checks are actually, in terms of value, on the rise right now. So what I want to look at this morning with all of you is, are there some lessons we can take from the merchant to consumer world and apply that to the supplier and buyer world? Are there some opportunities there to take some learnings? And to start with, I think a great place to always start is with the consumer. So the Canadian consumer is today armed with all manner of payment methods. I can pay now with an Interac card. I can pay later with a Visa card, or a Visa, MasterCard, Amex card. I can pay in advance. Starbucks convinces me all the time to put money on their wallet so I can pay in advance for $5 lattes. So there's all manner of options for us to pay electronically as consumers. And if we look at the stats, it's taking 5% per year of cash out of the system, 5%. Where's it going? Well, I looked at our numbers, and in our numbers, debit year over year is up 2.5%, and credit's up a little over 8% on a year over year basis last quarter. So that's where we're going. And I think there's 3 core reasons for that. The first reason is ubiquity. I can use a card to pay anywhere I go in Canada, basically. I can use my debit card and tap to pay in a farmer's market with merchants that are empowered with mobile point of sale. And I can use my Avion card, other than in Thunder Bay, almost everywhere. Had to do it. There we go. Look at you, Paul. So the second piece is, the first piece is really ubiquity. The second thing is we're actually embracing innovation. Contactless payments are killing cash. We're tapping over 100% more each and every year. I've been at Moneris a couple of years. It's been up 100%. It's now reached 20% of transactions are tapped. In Quick Serve, more than 2/3 of all their transactions are getting tapped. So great transition from cash to electronic. And the third piece is we like to be rewarded in Canada. Canadians love reward points. Americans love them too. The rest of the world, not so much. If you talk to industry experts and stuff, we're kind of unique, but we love accruing reward points, and that's clearly, to me, shifting. If I look forward, we did a survey in advance of Apple Pay's expansion. We pushed a survey out to see where Canadians' intent was in terms of electronic payments. What came back to us is most Canadians, not surprisingly, would prefer to pay with a card. So there's no surprise there. Two-thirds of us would prefer to tap to pay. Interesting, though, is if you're between the ages of 18 and 44, then 25% of you would use a mobile app. And said they'd give up their wallet, move to a mobile app. Now, only 15% of those, when you drill down one more, had actually done that and were using a mobile app. But it shows a propensity of the Canadian consumer to embrace electronic means of payments. And so, in summary, I'd say the Canadian consumer has choice, is embracing technology change, and has a desire to move with that change based on what they tell us in surveys. So that's the consumer side. But there's two sides to this, and Dan Kelly made some very good points yesterday. You need to look at the merchant equation. And outside of payments, if we look at the innovation that's gone on for small, medium businesses over the last few years, it's quite amazing. So in this picture, we're showing a merchant who's using an iPad-based point-of-sale system. They've got cloud-based inventory management, cloud-based customer management. They can do marketing. They can track all of their sales. And they can really make their business more efficient. And when we talk to businesses, and we talk to them a lot, what they tell us consistently is, save me time, help me sell more, and charge me less. And this, outside of what we bring to this equation, these systems are doing all of that. It's no longer a proprietary. You can picture those things, touch screen, robust, that costs a lot of money. This is consumer-grade hardware with apps that are downloaded and the merchants up and running. But for our part, what we're seeing is a move where these merchants are integrating that payment terminal to these lighter point of sales. Today, in our small, medium business base, about 1/3 of them integrate their payment terminal to their point of sale system. And what's shifting is that's moving, we think, over the next few years to 2/3. And when they move, what they get to link, which is important, is they can link the payment to what was actually bought. And when they make that link, it helps them be more efficient. And what it's moving them to is, on the merchant side, it's valuable for them to accept electronic payments, not just for the ease and convenience, but it helps them settle at the end of the day and move faster. So that's the point of sale, but we're talking about changing the checkout, and so I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about technology. So some of us are from Toronto, and we park, and the experience was you'd walk up, you'd find a meter in these open parking lots, and you'd enter a card. You'd wait far too long for the thing to dial wherever it had to dial. It actually went to us, but I'm not sure how it got there. And we'd make a decision and authorize the payment. And what the Toronto Parking Authority did was created an app. They jumped the curve and used technology with a view of making things better for both the consumer and themselves. So they thought about that important value equation. And as a consumer, I can roll into the parking lot, I can park, I can pay my rent on the spot for 2 hours for my appointment, and what happens to me is, an hour and 55 minutes later, I'm not back at my car. I get a message saying, Rob, would you like to top up your parking? So I'll pay the extra half-hour rent. I unfortunately have to admit that without that message, I would steal the last half hour and hope I didn't get a ticket, right? A lot of us would, happily. And once in a while I get a ticket, I'd be so mad. But really, a lot of the times I'd be cheating. So here's a way that they've empowered me to pay for all of my parking, which I'm happy to do, and I avoid tickets, and they actually make more rent. So they've used technology and created an equation that's better for both sides. And that's really what it comes down to when leveraging technology for benefit. So let's think about how we get cash out of the system. To get cash out of the system, eventually there's going to have to be a shift where you're going to have to start pushing consumers and get the last of it out. And where we've seen this shift occur first is obviously on airlines. You can't pay with anything other than a card on an airline now. And it's happening in unattended first and foremost. But what we're seeing happen is some retailers are turning it off, because the cost and time of dealing with it at the end of the day, counting it, the losses and other things aren't worth it. Kit and Ace is one of our merchants, a great Canadian success story. I don't know if you've been in their stores, but they're now popping up across North America. And it started in Gastown, and from their first store, they've never accepted cash. They've always been an electronic merchant because they just think it's better for their business. And I've talked to their staff, and they say that the odd person looks at them funny, and they're certainly the exception today. But if you look through a horizon of 10 years plus, I do think that more people will start to turn off cash. And that's why, to start off with, I think that as an industry, we could always do better, but we're doing a pretty decent job in empowering the consumer and the merchant side of electronic payments. Now, let's move to the business-to-business payments world. And I've got paper on the screen because according to MasterCard, 2.7 trillion, I'll get the T right, trillion dollars moves B2B in this country, and 50% of that moves on paper, in checks. The good news, I guess if you look at the stats from you always take the Canadian Payments tells us, if I use their stat, that 2% per year are coming out of the market in terms of volume between 2011 and 2014. So that's progress. But the actual value of exchange on checks continues to increase. And why is that? And obviously from where I'm standing, we're going to talk about it more from a cardable standpoint. But if you think about what we've done in our business historically from the supplier is, they're rekeying credit card numbers into potentially a physical terminal and then re-entering it into a number of systems and trying to match payments up. And it's all very inefficient. But let's look at the balance and see where the failure and balance is and where we could do better as an industry. And I think to start off with, we're going to talk, obviously, about buyers and suppliers rather than about consumers and merchants. But on the buy side, we've done a decent job of an industry of arming our buyers with electronification tools. And if you think about the card market specifically, there's a proposition for the buyer where it's typically available at little to no cost to you. It typically gives you time to pay, so you can pay now, but you're effectively owing the bank the money later. So it extends your payment window. And generally, it provides either a rebate or points in the small business scenario. So in that B2B scenario, there's a buyer that gets a host of benefits, plus we've invested on that side, and the issuers have done a great job of creating a lot of reporting tools, ability to push data across rails that have existed for a long time in real time that includes purchase and invoice data, and it's all in the transaction. So from a buy side, we've done a decent job. But if you ask the small business owner, hey, how about I start paying all of your invoices through credit cards today? They're going to shake their head and say no way, because it doesn't actually help their business. And they prefer a check because they still have to match up, and a check has that number right on it. They can match the invoice to the payment, and that's the way they do business. But if we ask that same small business, hey, for those payers that are out there and pay you in 90 days to 120, and you're not really sure when the payment's coming in, if you could have payment certainty and we improve the efficiency with which you do it, would you pay something for that? And you could have payment certainty on, say, day 15. And the answer is absolutely. They would absolutely pay, in that case, something to have that payment move. But it really comes down to a couple things. And I think the good news is when we're out there and we're having conversations, we know that on the buy side of this, there's a desire to move to these rails. And with that desire comes a willingness to acknowledge that, hey, we might have to speed up the payment we might have to be more reliable in the payment. Might have to speed things up if we're going to actually move these things to electronic. We might also, and the card brands have done a good job, lower the cost of payments. So, as Dan Kelly said it yesterday, he said that they'll pay something, but they may not pay this. And so the card brands have actually been lowering the interchange costs on business-to-business payments. But the third link, going back, remember the point I made about merchants. They want things that'll save them time, increase revenues, or save them money. And on number 1 and 3 of those things, if it does improve their cash flow position and it does improve their processing efficiency and make them more efficient, they'll sign up. But for us, as we look at the market, and obviously we have a certain mission in life, we're looking at how do we find a better balance for the supplier. And when we look at this scenario, the imbalance in business-to-business payments between the buyer and the supplier exists today. And later we're going to keep working with the card brands, and we're going to keep working on product solutions. So we're going to launch some solutions that will allow buyer-initiated payments to flow real-time through the system without PCI scope and other things for the supplier. But I think there's a tremendous opportunity for us as an industry if we think about the balance in how we run payments. And you think about the example of Toronto Parking Authority. If I know if the supplier wants to initiate the payment against me on a card that's on file and take that payment, and we have a trusted relationship, and I'm allowing them to do that, why can't they do that at the point they pick up the goods from my organization? And if we've agreed a reasonable price to do that, and I get paid on that instance or 15 days later, then that's a fair proposition for me, the business. And we're here, and I'm here saying that if there's opportunities where you see innovation, clearly we're going to look to start with rails that exist and using technologies in place, but then balancing that value proposition out on the supply side. So if you've got ideas or opportunities, our ears are open. We've already partnered with one fintech company to help bring this kind of innovation to market, and we're willing to talk to any more. So thank you very much for your time this morning, and look forward to talking to all of you later.
Thank you so much, Rob. That was fantastic. A few years ago, a consumer expert said to me something that I felt was quite profound at the time, which is consumers no longer compare an experience at one place to their direct competitor. So we don't compare our experience at Dollar Rental Car to Hertz Rental Car. We compare our experience at Dollar to Amazon One Click or Apple Pay. Whatever our best experience is, that's the bar that everybody now has to meet, not just competitors. And I think it's sort of profound to think about how that's going to affect all the kind of back channel stuff. The consumers are experiencing it, but they're also buyers and suppliers. And they're going to go into work and say, how can this be easier? And isn't that what you're all here talking about? You're going to go to your breakout sessions now. Back here for 11, please. We've got the Senior Deputy Governor of the Bank of Canada. Enjoy.